Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is a voiceover and I'm going to be showing you how I took this skirt and turned it into this cute top, so stay tuned for a step-by-step. Before I start, I do want to let you guys know that I usually make Instagram polls on designs I'm deciding between, so you guys should definitely follow me there so you can get a sneak peek and you can participate in the polls towards my next design. Before we start with any cutting, you're gonna need to take some measurements first. So the first one you're gonna need to take is your waist. And then you're gonna go from your nape to your waist, from shoulder to shoulder, from shoulder to elbow. And this is the way that I found it was easiest to do this one. And then you're gonna go from under bust to waist. And whatever that midpoint is in your chest, you're going to take that and measure that down to your waist as well. Whatever this one is, I have absolutely no idea what this is, but you're going to need to measure that too, from the midpoint to the under bust. And then you're going to take it from your inner shoulder to that midpoint. Yeah, just make sure you keep your measurements in mind as you're cutting. And I'm going to be using a body form, but you definitely don't need one. I just find it's easier to drape the pieces. The first thing you're going to do is start by cutting the seams of the skirt, and then go ahead and cut the top waistband off. And when you open it, you're just going to have one big piece of fabric to work with. After that, you're going to start drafting what the piece is going to look like. You're going to take your waist measurement and cut it in half for the front part of your shirt, and then measure the sides from the waist to the under bust that you took earlier. After that, you're going to start measuring out that weird curve that you took of your bust, but I found it was actually a lot easier to just kind of get down the points of how many inches it were and then just estimate what the curve would look like. I definitely suggest watching this all the way through before you attempt this, because there are some things that I would have changed. You're going to do the exact same thing for the actual bust pieces, and it's much easier if you just line it up where the under bust piece was already cut, because then you just have the exact measurements ready to go. One measurement I forgot to take was actually from the under bust to the armpit, so don't forget that so you know where you're actually going to start the curve of the armholes for the sleeves. When you have all your pieces, go ahead and lay them out, and if you don't have a body form, you can just lay it over yourself to make sure it stretches to fit. But I went ahead and started drafting where I wanted the pleats to go, and one correction I would make here is definitely make sure around the curvature of your bust you add more fabric, because I wish the pleats would have been more dramatic in my final piece. Now you're just going to go ahead and sew those pleats down using a 4th seam allowance and base stitching. You don't have to pin them together, but I find that it's a lot easier to pin the pieces back to the under bust section, so that way you know that you have enough fabric to go around the curve. I like to try it on too, just to make sure it's fitting properly. Then you're going to go back to your machine, and using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, you're going to sew all 3 of the pieces together to form the front half of the bodice. Please be smarter than me and remember to actually adjust the tension on your sewing machine when you're doing like different projects with different fabrics, because yeah, basically my sewing machine took a literal chunk out of the fabric, so just be careful and watch your tension. So at this point I noticed that I wasn't really liking how the front of the shirt was looking, so in hindsight I definitely suggest making that gap between, like right in the middle of your chest, I suggest making that a lot smaller, maybe like an inch instead of the almost 3 inches that I did. And I did actually go ahead and add a hemline to those inner pieces that were going to make the V. The back of this shirt was definitely the easiest to make. You just take the piece that you just sewed together and you follow it and you cut around it. I did leave some fabric at the top of the back just because I didn't want it to be low cut, but it's all up to preference. I did make the same hemline here that I made for the front V of the shirt, and this way when they're actually sewn the front and back pieces together, they're gonna line up as well. And then you just go in and sew the front and back together, starting with the shoulders first and then the sides next. You're going to need to take extra measurements about the circumference of your bicep and the circumference of your elbow. The sleeve was kind of tricky for me to get at first, but I realized that in the end the easiest way is just to take the shirt that we've already made and take that sleeve hole that we have, and using your measurements from your shoulder to elbow, that's the length you're gonna make it, and then cut the circumference for your bicep and your elbow in half, and that's how you know how wide to make it. By the time I got to the frills on the bottom of the sleeves, I didn't have that much fabric left, so I just went ahead and cut it. I think I had about 12 inches left, so I cut it so it was 7 and 5 inches, and then I went ahead and I cut those two pieces in half to make sure that they were identical on each side, and that way I had two identical sets for the left and right sleeve. It honestly doesn't matter how long they are, so long as one of them is longer than the others, so you get the layered effect on the sleeve. You're going to be adding a rolled hem to the bottom of each layer, so be sure to press it down before you move over to sew it, so it's going to be much easier. After this, you're going to go in and base stitch on the side that doesn't have the hem, and you're going to want to use the longest stitch because we are going to be going back in and hand gathering these pieces. To hand gather, you're going to be using the bobbin thread, and that's the side that you're going to be pulling to actually gather it. Just be sure not to actually break the thread, because if you do, you will have to start all over and re-stitch it. After you've gathered it, go ahead and sew it right sides together so that you have made a complete cuff. Before any of the cuffs are sewn, you do want to make sure you have your sleeve ready to go, because I find that the easiest way to attach the cuffs is to take that sleeve and line the cuffs up the way that they're going to be when they're worn. That way you can just flip the cuffs, and when you sew it down, you know when you put it back down, the layers are going to be in the right spot and they're going to be the right length. After you flip them and you've made sure that they look good, go ahead and pin those together in the right spot, because you definitely do not want this to come apart while you're sewing it, otherwise your cuffs on your sleeve are going to be crooked when you wear them. From here, it doesn't really matter which one you sew down first. You can either choose to sew the cuffs to the sleeve or the sleeve to the shirt first, but since your cuffs are already pinned, I guess it's a lot easier to just do that one. So just go ahead and sew those down using a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then sew the sleeve to the shirt like you would any other shirt. The very last thing left to do is hem the shirt at the bottom where the waist is, and you're just going to do the same thing that you did for all the other hems. You're going to make sure you press it down first, and you're going to go over and do a 1/4 inch rolled hem. And that's it, everybody. This is the final look. I really hope you enjoyed, and be sure to try it out for yourself. It's definitely one of the easier ones I've seen out and about. And please make sure you leave a like and comment, and be sure to subscribe if you like this, and come back to my channel for more.